Estimada comunidad universitaria, sean todos bienvenidos a esta nueva sesión de las jornadas virtuales de internacionalización. Hoy iniciamos este nuevo bloque para este semestre 2024-1. Estas sesiones son organizadas por la Dirección de Relaciones Exteriores de la Universidad Nacional de Colombia con el objetivo de acercar a la comunidad universitaria a estas oportunidades que se propician con miembros académicos, con aliados estratégicos, con personas que conocemos alrededor del mundo que tienen temas muy interesantes, tanto oportunidades académicas como becas, a través de redes y membresías, oportunidades también para investigación. Y este año de manera particular queremos acercarlos como a esas habilidades blandas que podemos adquirir para tener un mejor relacionamiento con las personas en el exterior y pues en general. En este caso pues tenemos unos invitados muy, muy especiales que nos acompañan desde el Reino de los Países Bajos. Ellos hoy nos van a hablar de interculturalidad y son expertos en ello. Son una institución que lleva más de 30 años prestando estos servicios a empresas, a academias, a personas que por motivos de trabajo académicos requieren trasladarse a otras regiones del mundo en las que necesitan un apoyo para saber cómo llegar, cómo aterrizar, digamos, de manera de la mejor manera y pues evitar inconvenientes en los temas de la comunicación. Mi nombre es Pilar Ruiz, soy asesora de la Dirección de Relaciones Exteriores y damos inicio a esta sesión. Welcome, Mr. Oscar van der Berg, founder and director of Intercultural Business Improvement. We meet in the European Association of International Education, EIA, in Rotterdam the last year. And he is accompanied by Juanita Pignis, a seasoned intercultural consultant and long-term user of IRC. Juanita grew up in Venezuela and is fluent in Spanish, so she will be translating at the end some questions and answers from our audience to Oscar if it's necessary. So welcome, Juanita and Oscar. Thanks to accept our invitation. And to be here today.
Quiero decir que nací en Venezuela, pero he vivido mucho tiempo, 2 años y medio más o menos en Bogotá. Entonces tengo mucho corazón y sentido para los colombianos. Y tengo una hija que nació ahí.
Ay, qué grato. Gracias por compartirlo. Thank you, Oscar. Welcome.
Thank you, Pilar. And sorry that I will speak English. My dear colleague, has joined me to help also with Spanish questions and maybe conversation later in Spanish. And Pilar, indeed, we met last year also in Rotterdam during the large conference for universities and educational institutions, AIEA. And wonderful to be invited today and speak a little bit about what we do. I am the founder of a small company named Intercultural Business Improvement in the Netherlands. And we started about 30 years ago. And we specialize in helping people in the broadest sense, because it's people in organizations, it's people in government, but it's also universities and teachers to deal with cultural challenges. And what I will talk about today is a methodology, an approach that we developed based also on a lot of experience that we have in working with people around the world. And what we found, I think, early on, is that just telling people about differences, telling people why maybe Colombians have different preferences from Dutch, does not always make people more effective. So we have seen that some people learn quite easily through knowledge. So tell them something about the actual differences and they will do a better job. But not all. And I can even, looking at some research that we have done together with universities, argue that it might be more than half of the people that you would meet in classes, in workshops, in all kinds of events that you do in order to help their development, will not develop easily from just sharing information about differences. So what we did is we looked at what is a way of helping people in their own development. Is there something that you need to add to the fact that you give them information about differences? This is a tool called the Intercultural Readiness Check. I will speak about that in more detail in a moment. We started with this about 25 years ago to develop the tool, and by now it's used by about 600-700 smaller and larger companies or single persons working in the educational sector worldwide, and there's about a database of about 100,000 people that have filled it in by now, which is also used for sometimes scientific purposes. We do engage also in different types of research on aspects of that database and the findings that we have. Pilar, I don't know how exactly, this is a new system for me to share my slides. How can are you in control of that? Am I in control of that?
Yes, we control the session, so we are going to start with the presentation.
Good.
William, proyectas la presentación. Gracias. So go ahead, Oscar, with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is the name of the tool that I mentioned earlier, Intercultural Readiness Check. I think important to say, which we say to all the people that we see in our programs, it's not a test. So we are not here to test you or to determine whether somebody is suited or not suited to work abroad. That's not the intention of what we're doing. The intention of what we're doing is helping people to identify learning goals, learning opportunities for themselves. How can I grow during this international assignment when I'm a student going abroad for a couple of months or weeks or maybe even a year? What personal learning goals would I have? For instance, what would I like to get out of my stay abroad in terms of my own personal growth? Are there areas that I already feel comfortable with, that what I see, this is something I do well, this is something that is easy for me to do, but are there also areas that maybe are not so easy for me, especially if I'm under pressure? And I'll give you in my presentation examples of what those areas might be. The idea, maybe the next slide, Pilar, if you are, is to make people more effective. We identified in the end 4 competencies, so 4 areas after a long literature study, everything that has been written about intercultural effectiveness. We identified 4 areas that are essential for success in working across cultures. Maybe next slide, Pilar. Like I said, affecting, so it's different from what you sometimes get when you give people information. It does not always mean that they become better at solving problems. Sometimes it might create stereotypes. They might see more problems rather than solving them. It might also, I'm sure, if you have experience in teaching things around intercultural studies to students, you always get questions around who is going to adapt. Are the other people also doing a seminar so they can understand me, or are they adapting to my style? Am I adapting to their style? So people are also left very often with questions around that. And what we wanted to do is answer those questions in the sense of effectiveness. What can you do yourself to be part of the solution and not create more problems for yourself and others? And also in terms of making everything more enjoyable, more effective as you are interacting with others. Maybe the next slide. You see these 3 words. They are for us core in our interaction with people who take intercultural training or coaching. you see very often, and there's a lot of literature around this also, that the emphasis of a lot of people is on that middle wheel, where it says performing. A lot of people, when they engage in an interaction with others in international teams, they, at a minimum, would like to make sure that the job gets done, that whatever the team needs to do will be done, and people do their utmost to be able to contribute towards a common performance, sometimes forgetting their own preferences, what they prefer themselves in terms of communication styles, in terms of the type of leadership they prefer, in terms of the way they would like to get feedback from others, in terms of the way they would like to learn and grow themselves, in terms of the way how they conduct meetings and make decisions within the team. All of these things can be influenced by culture. But if your emphasis in an international team is on getting the job done, you may, let's say, focus a little bit too much on that and not on connecting truly with others, or making sure that you're actually also enjoying, that you are energized around the work that you're doing. I've seen this many times working with teams, that therefore also people at the end of such a journey, and we can share later maybe in a link also with you some relevant literature on that, but there are quite a few studies that point out that at the end of such a journey, at the end of such a project, people then decide not to join an international team again, because they feel, yes, we did perform, we did get maybe some of the results we were looking for, but I personally did not enjoy it too much. It cost me a lot of energy, and I did not feel truly connected to others in the sense that they appreciated my communication style, my way of giving feedback, my efforts that I made as a leader, or helping others in that role as a leader. So rather than join that team again, I would rather go for a team that is more, let's say, built out of people that are very close to me culturally. So these are three things that we like to put back into people's minds when they think about international projects. Are you connecting well with others? Are you, of course, making sure that there is, in the end, a result of all the efforts that you put in as a team? And would you, if people ask you the question, would you want to join again the same type of setting in the future? Would you wholeheartedly say yes to that? Or would you have some doubts because you feel that this is not giving you a lot of energy, but it's costing you a lot of energy? Now, maybe the next slide, Pilar. In order to achieve that, in order to find maybe a way of enjoying, connecting, and performing, we looked at four things that professional people do, that people who work well across cultures typically would keep in mind. And you see them here in front of you. Their intercultural sensitivity, of course, one that you might expect. There have been a lot of studies that this is, in fact, one of the key indicators of future success. So people that are curious, people that are able to understand the logic of different perspectives that people bring to an international setting, are the people that will enjoy and find it easy to work across cultures. It starts already, you can see, with your own students, with the people that you're working with the language that people use to describe differences. So people would describe sometimes cultural differences to me where there's on the one side something positive, and on the other side there might be something less positive. My Dutch people in my classes sometimes might say, a cultural difference, I can mention one: I'm always on time and others are always too late. So this is a cultural difference, and I try to help them maybe to phrase that a little bit differently, to say there is maybe a perspective on time, an expectation on time that you have, which is a Dutch perspective, which is very precise and sequential time. But there may be other cultural perspectives on time that are more about finding the right combination of doing things at the same time, more polychronic time, having different ideas about expectations of others when certain times are mentioned. So you already find with people other words that would express some curiosity that they have in understanding the logic that others may bring to this situation. There's communication, which I very often have to explain, is about also being courageous. It's different from just knowing something or being curious. It's also really at a certain moment being able to build a repertoire of styles, to have more than one style of communicating something, and to be confident that if I use maybe a different way of bringing my message across, it will be as effective as the style that I maybe prefer in my own culture. To give you an example, in my culture, people always mention the fact that we prefer to be direct. So people in the Netherlands, and Juanita, as an old friend with a very international background, will probably appreciate this also. People would say, you're an idiot, but don't take it personal. They give you good, tough feedback. They focus also sometimes on the negative because they think, the positive, that's already taken for granted. We know that I'm generally positive. So if I give you feedback, I immediately tell you what I don't like. And if you then start to work with that, I go maybe a bit broader into addressing the overall quality of our relationship. But I start with what for me feels as the core message. And that's also the concern that people have in conversations. Their main concern in a conversation is, I want you to understand the task, the data, the facts that we are discussing. And if that leads to some little damage, some scratches in the relationship, some feelings of being hurt, that's okay. Then we will fix that later. And next week I will make another appointment with you and we'll have a coffee. So I can hopefully then repair that a little bit. But my main concern is the clarity on the task. And you might find a different logic where the concern is completely the opposite. So my main concern in a conversation with you is that we leave as good friends. And if you didn't completely understand some of the details of the tasks, who cares? So next week we have another meeting and I will explain to you a little bit more about the details of the task. But my main focus is on something else. And what you do with intercultural communication is you build a repertoire of styles and you become confident that by using sometimes another style, you are as effective as you were in maybe the style that you started out with. And you don't step back into your old style. That's what a lot of my fellow countrymen do. So they sometimes want to be indirect and they feel that they're doing a very good job and they're very contextual. But then because they're not so sure that the message really came across, they come at the end with a very direct point, just to be sure that you understood it. And this is sometimes not so much appreciated by others, because the point was clear. The message was understood, and indirectly maybe it would have worked much better. But that's why I use the word courageous. You need to have some courage to do this, to be able to rely on this other style and then be confident that what you wanted to get across came across. The third one is related to leadership, building commitment. What we mean by that is that you are able to build a network that is quite diverse. You are constantly inviting maybe also other people to your network. People with very different cultural backgrounds, and they become part of this network. And of course, a challenge that you will have in sort of managing this network is that sometimes conflicts may come up. People have different beliefs, different needs, different goals, different interests, and sometimes they might be in conflict. And your role as a leader or as a manager of this network is that you make sure that people stay connected to the network. In those moments, people might look at you and ask themselves, is this person now choosing the side only of the interest group on the other side, or is this person also helping me to stay on board also in this network? So very often as a leader, you're challenged to find solutions that keep people on board, that bring people together around shared goals, so you don't lose also a large part of that network. And the last one, managing uncertainty, it's the one that is hardest to develop. The first three we've seen, if you put time and effort into it, there you can, in a reasonable amount of time, develop them. The last one is a little bit more stable. It's more, yeah, how much energy for you is consumed when you are going into a different cultural setting. I always give my participants the example. I would ask them, you are getting a new job tomorrow, let's say in Dubai. Is your first reaction G, or is your first reaction why me? So what is immediately going through your mind? Are you worried, stressed? Does it cost you energy? Do you need to manage your energy carefully? Or does this new challenge, this maybe uncertainty that is in front of you in terms of your new role, a new environment, different styles of people that you are working with, creates immediately a sense of energy for you, looking forward to that type of interaction. And we did, maybe it's time for the next slide, Pilar, split this up into different facets. So I already gave you some examples of that. So if you get your score as a participant, as somebody that fills in the IRC, on the top level, on the blue lines, you get a numerical score. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So you are compared to the rest of the database, and then we indicate where you are in terms of the rest of the database. But you also get in-depth feedback on two, what we call facets of each competent, two parts. You could compare them to like a left and a right leg, like a left and a right hand. What do you do more easily when it comes to this competence? So when you're interculturally sensitive, are you really culturally aware? Constantly reflecting about yourself, maybe comparing yourself to others, studying about this, reading about it, or are you very good at picking up signals? So do you maybe not prepare so much, not read so much, reflect so much, but you're good to see that there might be different needs and respond in the moment when people express them. Of course, it's best if you can do both. If you ambidextrous, if you can use both hands, both feet, your effectiveness, of course, will grow. But you see sometimes people have a preference first for one and maybe less for the other. And they're all four. There's listening under communication. Are you a good listener of people that address maybe the situation much more indirectly? Can you hear what they're trying to say between the lines? And are you good at building a repertoire, adapting your own style? When it comes to building commitment, are you a good relationship builder, constantly bringing new people into your network? But are you also a good problem solver when people are in conflict? Can you then present solutions to this network that actually get people together around shared goals? And on the last one, do you have a general openness to cultural complexity? Do you like to be in that type of setting? But do you also learn from it? Do you take things away that you see in one setting and then say that would be a good idea to try out also in another setting? Now, maybe a few quotes, what people, like I said, we've been with this for some time. So maybe, Pilar, the next three we can just do a bit briefly, quickly. I worked a lot, this is a dear colleague of mine, Roger Lehman from INSEAD. We worked a lot together in different programs at INSEAD, and he pointed out that a lot of these competencies are also overlapping with what people are doing generally as a professional. So yes, they play an important role cross-culturally, but the beauty that he felt was that it also has a very strong link with other things that, for instance, people at INSEAD are trying to teach people in terms of managing their own development. Maybe go to the next one. From our dear colleague at the Swiss Post. Can you go to the next slide, Pilar? Or is it stuck? Yeah, Roger always takes a lot of time.
Is het een Engelsman of een Amerikaan?
It's an American, yeah. Are you still connected with us? Ah, here we are. So for her, it's, yeah, what can you achieve with people? That's, I think, also what we do. We do a lot of training here, also in the office where I'm now sitting. What can you achieve with people in a short period of time in terms of goal setting and spending maybe sometimes even an hour with them, where you might sometimes get lost if you just want to tell them everything there is to know about a different culture. And now what you do in this hour, you say, yeah, but focus on yourself. What do you find easy? What interests you? Where's your energy? What would you like to learn? What goals would you like to set? And for her, this was one of the key elements. And maybe the last one, and I promise to be shorter on this, else we become sort of into a marketing thing. But let me go to the last one, which was a nice comment also, because for us important. The next slide. Which is about, I don't have time to go into that here. We're perfectly happy to answer questions about that later, but people mentioned that it's actually quite valid and reliable. That's something also we spent a lot of time on. We wanted to really get the best possible results out of it in terms of the reliability and validity of the tool. And been a lot in contact with different statisticians around the world to do analysis of the database, also looking carefully at our items, because at the end, of course, you want people to get a good sense of the assessment they made of themselves. Let's go and look at the results, which is the next slide. And so this is what it might look like. If you filled in the questionnaire online, then this is what you might get. And you might get this, by the way, in different languages. So by now it exists in 8 languages. You get feedback, and the first page is just an indicator of where are you in terms of comparing yourself with the rest of our database. Maybe a quick point on that. So if you score an 8 or a 9 or something in that area, it means already that you're really confident about this particular competence, that you feel, yes, of course, there's a lot I can learn in this area, but there's also a confidence that I feel. I feel that this is something that even if I'm under stress, even if people put a lot of pressure on me, even if things are not so easy in my project, I will still keep this ability. I will still be able to communicate effectively in different cultural settings. For instance, if you look at the profile in front of you, this is somebody that scored an 8 on intercultural communication. So somebody that when they looked at the items, they were really confident that this is something that is an ability that they will always have, they will always show in different settings. Of course, if you go lower, we always have a discussion with participants of does this reflect really also the way that you would see yourself? What's your response to this? It would not be in the sense of saying to them that this is something that is really something they need to hugely worry about. So we would try to check also with the person what's the response, but the lower those scores go, the more, of course, you would question, you would have a conversation with people. What happens to you if you're in that type of setting? What happens to your curiosity about cultural differences, for instance, when you're under pressure? What happens to your energy? Are you no longer so keen to be in a different cultural setting when there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of surprises, so you lose a lot of your energy? What happens to your network? Do you only go and talk to people that are similar to you? This is what we've seen also as an issue that plays a lot of role at universities when you have international student groups. In the end, do they fall apart in different groups that sit together, work together, talk a lot with each other because they all have the same language and the same cultural background? And there's a bit of a reluctance to build those relationships with people that have a different language, maybe a different cultural background. And how can you stimulate this with people to do this more actively? So what you see here, and can go maybe to the next slide. You see, this is a build-up. It's called the Standard Nines. I'm sure you're familiar with it. A nice slicing of the database into 9 groups, which represent this bell-shaped curve together. And you would see that if you score a 5, sometimes people, that's very interesting, when they get their feedback and they see, oh, gee, I only scored a 5, how disappointing, I'm so low. In fact, they're not. In fact, when they score a 5, it means that, yeah, you have scored like most people that we have in our database. A lot of people, of course, in the database would score in the middle. It's about 20% of the people that score average, that have an average score. And it's only a few people. So if your expectation is, why do I not have a 9? Yeah, because it's maybe only 4% of the total database that we have where people actually have this type of score. People that are ultra confident about their ability in this area. It's not a common thing. And even if they are really confident, they still would ask themselves in settings, what's the right behavior? How can I help others to develop? Mm-hmm. Am I always showing? Am I quickly bored, for instance, with people that don't have this competence, which is a challenge for people that score a 9? I see that sometimes with people who have been abroad all their life and they are now in a leadership position and they look at young, high potentials that are hired by the organization, and they immediately get a sense of, oh yeah, that person has the potential, that person don't bother too much because they don't understand, they're not at my level. So how much do you then take responsibility also for others when you're at that high level? And so there are different types of conversations that you have with people who are at different points of this bell-shaped curve. Maybe the next one, which is maybe a summary. I tried to already mention quite a few of these things in the previous part, but what we try to achieve with it, with let's say not a huge effort on the side of the students or inside of the participants that we have in our learning events. It takes them about 15 to 20 minutes to fill in the questionnaire. They get a rich feedback on important competencies that they will need to be successful, to be effective in working across cultures. And they can choose from a large amount of tips, so they can identify for themselves what is most important to me. I would always recommend to anybody that fills in the questionnaire and looks at the results is to say, take only maybe 3 things that you really want to spend time and effort on. Don't take 20 things, but only the things that really for you feel at this point most essential for future success. So you complete the self-assessment at the moment when you make the selection of the things that are most relevant to you. It's not that the self-assessment is completed when you see the first page and you see, oh, I scored a 5. No, the self-assessment is truly completed when you say, these are the things that I really would like to spend time on in the time that now is ahead of me in the project that I'm now engaging in. We also did, maybe it goes too far for this session, I would like to leave also some time for discussion, and maybe also as Juanita, somebody who has been with us, working with us for a long time, working with the IRC for a long time, maybe a few comments on that. But there's a lot of things around it. There are online action plans that students can use and exchange comments with other students, exchange tips also with other students. So these are the things that we offer also in the context of the tool. But maybe I can elaborate that on that a little bit more in a conversation. Maybe the last slide for the moment. Pilar, if you would switch to that. Is it stuck or?
Yeah,
There's one
Yes.
more slide. Do we?
Thank you.
Okay, we leave it for the end. But I can point out that there's a book that, there's. If you wanted to do more further reading on this, there's a book that we published. I have to say already 10 years ago. Again, it's time for the next book, but we were too busy with other things. But at least in this book, you see a lot of in-depth information on the way the tool was created and also can be used in different settings. Maybe I can, Juanita, maybe on your side, what did I miss? What would you like to?
No, very good explanation, Oscar. Thank you so much. So go ahead, Juanita.
You missed a lot.
Yeah, no, come on.
This is Dutch feedback.
Yeah.
This is an example of which I would never, ever, ever do if I'm in a different intercultural setting. So this is not what you do. No, it is exactly what Oscar says. For me, the most important one is the incertidumbre, the last one, because that is bottom line your sentiment. There are three things. Es la cabeza, es el corazón, y son los manos que los hacen. And able to usar los manos, you need the head only a little bit. You really only need a little bit. It is indeed about the courage of jumping in and doing it. And the IRC helps to develop competencies to repair when you have the feeling you've done something wrong, because that is basically the biggest anxiety that people have is, what am I doing wrong? Then what? And so it is always about being able to go back and repair, hacer la cuenta to the other side. And to be able to do that, you need to know what your style is. You need to know how you do that. And it is about practicing, and making mistakes. But if you're sure that you can go back and repair your mistake, that's when you become interculturally competent, effective. Yeah.
Great comment. Thank you, Juanita, for this information. So we have some questions about this explanation and this webinar. So maybe to summarize, additional to language, what are the top 5 items or tips maybe that according to your own experience can affect this first impression in an intercultural environment? Maybe presentation or put attention to nonverbal language. What do you think about that?
No son las lenguas, es saber su propia cultura. Cuando sabes y que es importante para ti, porque también es hay muchas variaciones en el aspecto cultural.
Sí,
Eso es primero, porque cada vez todo viene otra vez a tu a usted. No es nada de ver con todo el resto del mundo. Es qué hago yo en una situación intercultural. Entonces, eso es una de las cosas bueno, yo siempre tengo mucho tiempo para eso, para tener claro para los participantes qué son mis imágenes de mi propia cultura. Cuando sabes eso, ya se puede comunicar con los otros, porque, bueno, yo lo hago así y tú lo haces así, pero entonces, ¿qué vamos a hacer?
sí, interesante y pues también muy, muy importante tener en cuenta estas diferencias en el relacionamiento con los otros. Agradecemos a nuestra audiencia realizar las preguntas en los chats de las conferencias para hacer en vivo a nuestros invitados. So, Oscar, what about you? Maybe about these questions about the first impression, the moment of the first impression. What do you think? What
The
can you suggest?
first impression for who? For the person traveling, or
Maybe in the preparation to ourselves to maybe want to cause a first impression in an international visit or in an international environment to be maybe more neutral or so on.
the most important
Mm.
things to keep in mind is yeah. Yeah, I think for me it really starts with a feeling of enabling people, not feeling a sense of loss. What I discovered with a lot of cultural training in the traditional sense, and it's interesting. We just finished a large project here in Europe. I can also put that in an online link. It's on professional standards for the interculturalists. So people that do intercultural training, what should they be able to do? What are maybe some the ways that they can look at themselves as professionals? And what we looked at when you look also at a lot of literature that is around on learning about cultural differences, that a lot of the examples that are given in the literature, in the books, are negative examples, are why it does not work. And my whole life, when I started out in the 90s on this, in the 1990s and 20 years ago, you always had a lot of examples in literature about why an idea that was created in Colombia did not work in Venezuela, or why an idea that was created in the US did not work in France. And that's interesting to know also, but the emphasis was always on it does not work. Whereas I would like to get people into a setting where they say, it's really interesting. There is maybe a complementarity, there's a challenge. I'm not going to lose something. It's also what I say to the people that join all the learning events that we have. This is not about giving up something, about losing something of yourself that is important to you. This is really sometimes very often about gaining something, about becoming stronger. As a very simple example, if you are coming from a culture
Sure.
that allows rules, and you always like to have nice, clear rules, then you may come to a culture where they say, yeah, the rule, it depends on the situation. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, it depends. And you can say, oh gee, I need to tell them harder that the rule is important. Or you can also say, no, I study the type of data they give me. I study the examples that they give, the data that they give me on where my rules might be hard to implement. So I learn a lot from, let's say, the data that they give me to create better rules that can deal with more exceptions. So you see this type of curiosity that leads also to maybe a strengthening of your own value orientation, leads to a very positive attitude with people rather than feel a sense of loss or a sense of I have to give up or I have to become like them or this will be threatening for me. It's also discovering really some of the strength within yourself where you have really something to add and bring value to others, but also where others bring value for you and where you can develop yourself and how you can take that to the next level. I think that's for me an essential message to give to people around this topic.
Yes, very valuable words. Mm-hmm.
It's not about adapting. It's not about becoming Colombian or Dutch or whatever. That's not what it's about. It's about finding ways where you are able to use your cultural elements and to combine it with the other side. And that for that you need communication. That's why communication is so important. And then you gain. The others gain as well, but then you gain.
Yeah, sure. Very interesting point of view and very important tool for life. So finally, can you tell us about your thoughts of artificial intelligence? How can help this tool to our international intercultural relationships or issues, or maybe to train some soft skills? How do you think artificial intelligence can play a role in intercultural issues in the future or now maybe?
That's a tough final question. Let me. I think there are so many thoughts on artificial intelligence, and I think let me start with going back a little bit with what I think you always have to ask yourself when you talk about this type of technology, like artificial intelligence. But in the past, we had, of course, all kinds of different technologies that started to be used globally. And I think what sometimes is forgotten, and that's interesting to see in organizations, is that the technology originated in one place.
Yeah.
It was very much an expression of one culture, and it suited very much the needs of that culture. But maybe it did not fit so well with some of the other cultures. So the tremendous directness, or for instance, that some people use with email is appreciated a lot by the Dutch and maybe by others also. But for other people, people might feel there is something that I need to do with email that would make it better suited for the way that I would communicate effectively within a relationship. So, so think of that also before you say what's maybe where does it really fit, with what cultural orientation does it fit. And if I now look at AI also, I mean, yeah, what is interesting is of course the tremendous speed that you have now with, for instance, doing a literature search or finding summaries of certain things. You can use that yourself, but always remember that you have to bring the context. If you become dependent too much on the tool itself without thinking yourself about the context and maybe the things that are not included in the analysis that you get from AI, yeah, you become too dependent on it, and you may find also problems that you get in certain cultural settings. So it's like all tools. I mean, you're amazed by it. I mean, I did one on what is called now cultural neuroscience. I'm a bit skeptical of it, and I did through AI a search of what are all the scientific reviews about it, and And you get, in no time, you get 10 wonderful, very strong arguments why you should not go for cultural neuroscience. So, but maybe, of course, it's also the way you ask the question to AI. But so it's helpful, but always stay in control yourself and use your own experience and knowledge to see what is it maybe not giving me, or where would it not be so appropriate. And a lot has that, I think, in our profession. I still remember I worked at the Michigan Business School for many years, visiting there, teaching. And one of my colleagues had a tremendous job. He had to do a lot of work because he only had to fix the relationships that were broken by email. That was his job. So there were students who, when they went on the international project, American students that would write to the Polish company, for instance, where they were working, immediately a message to the boss of that company when they were not happy with something. And then the boss would be insulted by who is this student. And you had a wonderful job trying to constantly fix relationships that were broken by technology. So sometimes maybe think also, when do I use the technology and when not?
Okay, great. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Juanita, for these talks, for this session. Is important to be authentic, to be ourselves in their relationship with others, and interculturality is important. We have a lot of tools to use to communicate, to express ourselves, and here we have two experts to learn. So, agradecemos al señor Oscar y a la señora Juanita por este importante espacio que ha sido de mucho provecho para nuestra comunidad académica. I'm going to make a parenthesis in this part, and I let this to the end because we call these spaces Tinto. Tinto is a Colombian coffee that we share with friends, so we call Tinto with our partners, with our inviters. So this is an intercultural, a Colombian cultural name, Tinto, that is the coffee that we share with our friends, with our partners. So thanks to coming, we invite to everyone, our strategic partners, to attend to be part for our Colombian uses and traditions. So that is why we call these jornadas de internacionalización Tinto con or Tinto with our partners, to approach them to our Colombian culture and to our university. Thank you so much to be here.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, adiós.
Gracias, lindo día. Los esperamos el próximo jueves al próximo Tinto con la Universidad de Ghent. Tendremos una invitada muy especial, una egresada de nuestra universidad, la señora Natalia Cano, quien nos hablará sobre las oportunidades con la Universidad de Ghent el próximo jueves 22 de febrero de 9 a 10 de la mañana en los canales de la Dirección de Relaciones Exteriores. Les recordamos que estos espacios quedan alojados en nuestras redes sociales de Facebook, YouTube, X, que ahora antes era Twitter, e Instagram, para poder que los revivan y puedan tener más información de este y de los eventos anteriores que hemos realizado desde el año 2020. Muchísimas gracias. Buen día para todos. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Adiós. Gracias.